slideshow tomorrow. Richard's seen this one already. I have a couple of things that I've shared with Richard that I don't think any of the rest of you have. One is I was actually his boss, if such a thing could be the case, except maybe Caroline. The other thing was, when I first arrived at Goddard, I had the unique opportunity to share an office with Richard. Back in those days, it was actually a 3-person office. Those of you at Goddard take note, 3-person offices did exist in the past. But I shared an office, and I sat between Richard and Richard White on this side. And just imagine having Richard sitting next to you for 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week. You see him in dispatches, and you get these little bits of ideas. But imagine that sort of constant deluge. I can't say it wasn't beneficial to me, but as a fresh out PhD, I hadn't developed a filter yet. And they all sounded good, and I'd go off and do some data analysis, and very rarely did anything come of it, but something for good. At one point, he actually even got me working on AGN for a while, and we wrote some nice stuff. What's interesting is I was watching Ant's talk about 3C120, and we still have some Einstein SSS data in 3C120 where we actually saw some special features. And I'd love for Ann or somebody else to go back with 20 years of hindsight and actually explain those features to us, because we never could figure them out. One of the interesting things sitting with Richard was not only the deluge of ideas. We had our desks both face the same direction, and we shared this table. And when I first got there, that table was empty. And then this gradual diffusion of piles of data. So eventually I would just, when it started falling on me, I just kind of pushed it back over to his area. We finally did a rearrangement at Goddard. I got a different office. And, my replacement in that office was Richard Kelly, which led to embarrassment of riches. But Richard then moved into his own office, and those of you who visited his office in Building 2 will remember it as being something of an incubator for ideas. There was something remarkable about that office, regardless of what happened to the heating and cooling system in that building. His office was always 85 degrees. And I'd like to think it had something to do with the heating and cooling system, but maybe it was just all of these ideas that Richard was generating. Anyway, when Richard left Goddard, they had to tear down Building 2. Richard has some interesting personal attributes that we all have gotten to know and love. I like to think of him as being avant-garde, maybe an iconoclast. But some of them that come to mind were, well, one thing that certainly was enforced, has been enforced past days, is what I refer to when we listen to talks is the Richard question. How many talks did you have in the past days when Richard didn't raise his hand and ask a question? The answer is maybe one. And it got to the point where we would be at meetings or we'd be listening to talks, and I would just wait, because I always enjoyed. Richard always came up with the good question, and it's always been fun to listen to him give that question. The other thing about Richard, of course, is his writing style is way out in advance. I know many of you have seen email from him, recognize that he comes from the E.E. Cummings School.
Punctuation and spelling.
The other thing is that Richard hides it, that he's somewhat organizationally challenged. In all the years at Goddard, we were supposed to wear a badge. He never did. He always had problems filling out his performance form. I had to help him. There's this one famous story where Richard was, by the time he left Goddard, was what was referred to as an ST, a very special, high, top-end scientist. And he had a different performance form from everybody else. And one of the things that he had on his performance form, like I had as a supervisor, was safety. So he had to write a little thing about how he contributed to organizational safety. Okay, so Richard came to me and said, Rob, I can't do this. And I thought about this for a while. And this is about 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, he was the nominal XMM US project scientist. So I thought about it for a while, and this is my job to come up with stuff like this. So I gave him the solution, which was, we have to say that the XMM GOF didn't have a single safety-related incident this year. One of the things you probably don't know is that Richard actually has won a number of awards, especially in recent years. Two that I think he should be particularly proud of. One is the Goddard Award of Merit, which is the highest award that Goddard Space Flight Center offers people. But the second award he received was the NASA Distinguished Service Medal, which is the highest award that NASA offers. And I think, I want to get a little bit serious here, but we haven't had a lot of facts about Richard. And I want to read some of the words that came out of the nomination that we wrote for Richard for his award. During his career at NASA, he was author and co-author of over 340 referee papers. That's over one a month. His papers are heavily cited. His H index, this was a year or so ago, is 83. I'll note that the typical H index of somebody in the National Academy is 45. I think we have an issue here. Richard should be in the Academy, there's no question about that. This is among the highest values of any astrophysicist, and is probably the highest of anybody who ever worked for NASA. Dr. Mushotzky has served as an investigator on numerous NASA or NASA-supported missions. EO1, the Einstein Observatory, Broadband X-ray Telescope, Rossi X-ray Time Explorer, ASCA, Suzaku, and Astro H. He's the only scientist to have served simultaneously on the science working group for both Chandra and XMM and Suzaku. And of course, he's used all these data for doing wonderful science. Despite his distinguished record as a researcher, what is most impressive about Richard and what is his lasting legacy is his influence on those around him. He was the official supervisor of approximately a dozen PhD students, all of whom have gone on to successful careers of their own. Many of you were in the room. He also mentored a comparable number of postdocs who have gone on to faculty or research positions elsewhere. But his reach goes further. There's not a single scientist in the X-ray Astrophysics Laboratory at Goddard, or possibly the entire Astrophysics Division at Goddard, who has not been influenced or had their research improved in some way by Richard. He has been a font of ideas with deep knowledge spanning astrophysics across the electromagnetic spectrum. He takes great delight in sharing insights with colleagues, as we all know. He has been inclusive in his research, so oftentimes offering his best ideas for younger colleagues to follow up. I was a beneficiary of that many times. Anecdotally, a hallway conversation between Richard and a colleague, Harvey Mosley, led to the invention of the X-ray microcalorimeter. This is a true story. Greg mentioned this yesterday. And of course, we know that the X-ray calorimeter is our future in X-ray astronomy. I just wanted to say those few things. I think that sums up how we all feel about Richard. So, thank you. Thank you.